Hey guys, welcome back to RLDesign.Innovations. My name's Brian. Today we're not doing a project. What we're doing today is continue on with LightBurn tutorial, and we're going to focus on the preference area. I received several emails about folks, what do you set, what do you need to set, so we're going to go through that. In addition, some of the projects that are upcoming, we're going to look at some additional wood turning. We're going to look at also taking some scroll saw projects and then after from the scroll saw and kicking them up on the laser, as well as taking some, say, old cutting boards and looking at what kind of designs you can make within LightBurn to spruce up some old cutting boards. We're going to take one that's from my great-grandma. It's a little over 100 years old, and how we can just spruce it up a little bit, maybe put her name, my grandmother's name on it, just to ID it. It's not used anymore, just to finish it up and make it more into a plaque. We're going to do that. I'm also going to show you how to take a pine cone, which I picked up off the grounds of Roosevelt State last year. I'm going to put it into a vat of acrylic, show you how you can solidify that, and then turn that on the lathe to make that into a pen. So a lot of fun stuff coming. Anyway, let's get on to LightBurn. Let me show you how those preferences work, and we'll go from there. Okay, so we're in LightBurn 2.05. Again, LightBurn 2.1 is going to be coming out shortly, maybe in a month or two. They're still beta testing. They have the second, I'll say, release candidate they're testing, so hopefully it'll come out soon. There's some new capabilities, especially with the camera system. Again, they added additional calibration capabilities, so looking forward to that. I've been beta testing. So far, it looks great. So let's talk about preferences. There's a couple of ways to access it. If you click Edit on here and you go to Settings, that's one way. Another way is, depending if you're Windows or your Mac, if you go up here and you see this little two gears right over here, you click that, it brings it up as well. So let's go through. We're going to start with the editor settings, and then from there we'll move down. So the beginner mode, I don't have this enabled, because if you have it enabled, it shuts down or actually hides a lot of the advanced capabilities of LightBurn. So leave it off. This allows you to have all the advanced capabilities. Ignore out-of-bounds shapes if possible. What this is when you're importing, say, pictures or an SVG file or something else, when it comes into LightBurn, if it's bigger than your workspace, whatever's on the outside of the workspace, it will ignore it. So I always leave that. Invert mouse wheel zoom direction. So a lot of the mouses over here have a little wheel, and you can invert. If you don't like going up means zooming in, or reverse, you can reverse that. That's all that does. Not a big deal. The next is save cut selected, selection origin to project. I leave this disabled. So say I'm working on a project and I have a cut selected and it's, you know, not directly in the origin, somewhere else. This allows you to save that positioning and the object for cutting. So if you bring something else in, has something similar, it'll automatically set that, disable that. That I don't use at all. The default cut selected state is, for example, if you have a template that has multiple items on there and you use it all the time, you cut different shapes and different types of projects. But what this allows you to do, if you enable it, if you highlight one of those items in your template, only the highlighted will be cut out. That's all that does. Now, another way to enable default selected state is if you go to your laser window, and right over here it says cut selected graphics, you click this, and that's another way of doing it. Now let's talk about use selection origin state. Okay, default uses selection origin state. What this is, if you enable it, you can enable it here. You could also enable it in your window over here. What that is, let me show you. Say I moved my laser, the laser head is right here. I have a jig set up just for argument's sake. I put that there. Then I would go over here, start from. I'm going to say user origin, and say again, my laser head is here. I would then set this to over here. So that way, for this template or this jig I put in there, every time I put a new piece in there, if this is enabled, use selection right here, use selected origin. If that's enabled in the settings that I showed you, and we'll go back in a sec, every time you go to start, it will start from that piece. Again, this is, I say this is more for folks that don't have a camera system on their laser. That way it's easier. So again, if I enable it over here, default cut selected state, I go back there, and I can then, every time, depending on where I put that little dot up here, from that point right there would then either start engraving or cutting, whatever your design is, every time until, let me cancel out here, until I put it back to absolute coordinates. The next one is save state of move, rotate, scale switches. Okay, so what this is, if you look on the bottom over here, you can either do it there, which disables all of them at once, if I were to close the screen, or you go down here to move, size, rotate, or shear. This, what does, it affects your objects on the screen. So for instance, say I put a box on here. Now I'm going to say I can't move that. I can't rotate it or size it. You notice everything removed. So that will help you if you're doing, say, an architectural drawing that has to be exact. You're doing a map that needs to be cut out and engraved, and you don't want to make mistakes by resizing it because, say, it has to be accurate to the millimeter. You disable these right down here. Same thing with shearing. All of these. That very simple. Again, in the edit preferences, I'm just going to put mine back. In the edit preferences, that's disabling all of them at once. Oop, go to edit, settings. Okay, no big deal. Load default layer settings on new or restart. Again, pretty self-explanatory. Just loading default layer settings, whatever you had set up. Switch to select mode after drawing a shape. Without it defaulted, let me show you what happens. If I go in here, I pick a square, I go right here, you can see I could continue on creating new squares. If I go back to settings, I enable this. Right over here, this bottom one, again, switch to select mode after drawing a shape. Now let me show you what happens. I go back to here, I'm going to do a circle, an ellipse this time. I go over here. Now if you notice, as soon as I'm done drawing, it goes into the selection mode. Why is this useful? If you're only doing one drawing at a time where you don't need to keep going back up there, but after you draw it, you need to resize it or whichever, and you don't want to have to keep going back to change the mode, that's what that does. I use it all the time. Automatically check for updates. That's self-explanatory. You want your software up to date all the time. Use system clipboard. What this allows you to do, if you're using Control-C, Control-V, it puts it right into the system. So what happens if you don't have this enabled? Again, when it's enabled, you can copy things from other programs. Say you in Word or Adobe Illustrator and you had an image in there and you copied it, Control-Z, or you use the menus to say copy. When you go into LightBurn, you can hit Control-V to paste. If you have this disabled, you can't do that anymore. You can't copy and paste it in LightBurn. When would you want that enabled? If your system seems to be running extremely slow, part of the diagnostic tool is to disable that. Really, that's the only time you're going to want it disabled. Every time you're going to want it enabled so you can copy and paste. Say you want numbers from a spreadsheet. Maybe you want artwork, you on the web, you found something, you want to pop it in here. You're going to need it enabled. Again, it's used primarily for diagnostics. Auto launch files in running copy of LightBurn. What that is LightBurn's running, and all of a sudden you have your Explorer window open, or you have your Find open in Mac OS, and you find the file, you click on it, it then opens it in LightBurn. No big deal there. Ignore the start button if monitor is off or asleep. This is a safety feature, and what this does is it prevents, if say you're going into LightBurn, your laser's on, and this prevents the start button, which some lasers have an activation. By hitting a start button, it'll start going on. And especially for those people that have an open laser, meaning it's not in a cupboard like the Xtool or a Thunder laser or many, many others that are combined in a cabinet. So this is basically a safety measure. The other thing is if your monitor is off, say your computer goes to sleep or the laser goes to sleep, and you hit the start button again on your keyboard, or LightBurn open, you're opening LightBurn, it doesn't send a false signal to the laser to start and activating, turn it on. Again, total safety feature. That's all that is right there. Save job log. What that is used for is when you're engraving, it'll save the log of what's happening all behind the scenes. So pretty much for diagnostics. Use internal load, save dialogues. Use external load, save dialogues. So the use internal load, save dialogue, That's basically your load and save capabilities within LightBurn, using its own internal software, the API per se, within LightBurn. External load save dialog, that uses the load and save capabilities within your operating system, within Windows or Mac OS or Linux, whichever. And then bypass all of those is not using, you know, the Windows. It's directly using like a third-party save and load capability. Why would you change it from using internal if your system is crashing? This is, again, a diagnostic. First thing I would do is if every time you went to save something and the system crashed, try clicking using external load or save dialog. If that doesn't work, it's still crashing, then go to bypass system load and save dialog and see what happens then. Again, it's diagnostic. Leave it on use internal load / save dialog. That's the best thing to do. It's internal to the software, and most of the time it does not cause this issue, but on some Dell brand computers it does. Okay, text settings, your default font. Right now mine's set to Calibri. You can set it up. I'm going to click on to see all these fonts. What I like about this view, it also shows you all the various fonts over here. The default height, I keep it at that, 25. HX font path, if I was using things which are called SHX font types, that's what I would enable it. Enable right to left text support. I don't have that. That's, think of like when you're reading from the right to the left. So when you type in there, it goes from the right to the left. Normally in English speaking, we go from the left to the right. That's all that is. What double click is, I have it enabled. Let me show you this. I'm going to put text in here. I'm going to go right over here, go right here and put test. Now I click somewhere else. I'm going to go back to the selection tool. I go back here. If I double click this, if you notice, here's the text that I just typed. Say I wanted to add test is test. You see it appears here. But this is the strength of this window, so you don't have to play with the fonts and everything up there. You can adjust your font right here. And what I like about it, as you're scrolling through, you see all the different fonts on your screen. So you can pick something that you really like. So I like that. Now you say, okay, let me adjust the height to fit in that box. So I can go right here, and I can do that way, or you can type it in. Welded or not welded. Welding, and again, I have a video on this, which I call melding. It's to keep the text together, so you can keep it welded or not welded. And I show you that in the video. The height, H space, horizontal space, vertical space, I leave it at default, but you could increase that. You can see how it's spreading between each character. Same thing. If I had 2 layers of text, I put the space between the two. A line, I want to line it in the middle. Again, think of a word processor. Do I want to line X-wise, the horizontally, in the middle of the box that I have, or not? Right now I have it in the middle. I could put it to the left or the right. Again, it's justification. The same thing for the Y, which is your vertical. Top, middle, or bottom. You can adjust that. So very straightforward, very powerful this capability is. Let's go back into Edit, Settings again. So we completed everything on this page. Let's go to Units and Grids. I like using millimeters, especially since I work with 3D printers all the time. A lot of folks like to use inches. That is fine. Whatever makes sense for you. Let's go over to the right. Grid contrast, that's the grid over here. You can adjust it to however you like. High contrast, low, I leave it on medium. Vertical spacing, again, mine's in millimeters, so I have them every 5. Grid snap distance, every 1. Click selection tolerance, that means 3 pixels. That the tolerance when you're clicking, so if you're zooming in, if you're outside of that, you're not going to click it. The snap distance in pixels is 10, same thing. My control arrow, shape and move, this is increments. So if I'm using my control key and I'm clicked on something and I'm using the arrow key, it will move 1 millimeter at a time. If I just use the arrow key without the key and the object is selected, I use the arrow key, it'll move 5 millimeters. If I hit the shift key and hit my arrow key up, down, left, or right, it will move 20 millimeters. Again, for all of these, you're using the arrow keys while the object is selected on your keyboard, and using the control arrow, or shift arrow, and it moves accordingly. Nice tool to have if you know your mouse isn't really accurate, or some people have a mouse that goes like this. It like jumps because maybe it's an old trackball mouse, whichever. This helps with that. Display. Right now I have anti-aliasing slower but pretty. What does that mean? That means if you have, say, a higher def monitor, higher resolution, we'll say a modern LCD, you want that enabled so the image is prettier, as they state, and you won't see any flickering. If you disable it, you may see flickering again depending on your monitor. Filled rendering, so when I'm rendering, like I do Alt P as in Paul, it renders what I'm drawing, the fill. So it's filling that so I can see a representation of that. So that's how I have it right now. Reduce motion, slow, I do not have that enabled. I like to have it go quick, normal, whichever. Use dark background. What this is for the background of your display. If I hit OK, you can see it goes right there. Let's go in this way. Let's go back to display. Unclick it, go back, it goes to white. Show palette button labels, very straightforward. You see these down here, the palette buttons, which are your layers. If I unclick it, so show full screen line cursor, what that is. Let me show you. See my cursor's moving around, see the lines with it? That's what that is for. Go back to display. Show rotary enable on main window is if you have your rotary enabled, a message would appear down here that says rotary is enabled. Show cylinder correction enable on main window. Same thing, if you're using the cylinder correction item and it's enabled, that will appear down here as well. Show work area center cross. That's what this is right here. You have your X and the Y cross. It's showing you the center of your origin. That's what that is. Curve nodes, I have it in normal. My toolbar icon size, I can go, and you can see it's just making them whatever size you like. I keep it the smallest on this monitor. Curve quality, when you're doing curves in here, I have it perfect. The font size, and you won't see it here, but it's really, the font size and menuing font size, so I'll leave it right there. Okay. Import, export. Group imported shapes, I have it disabled because I like, say I'm bringing in a SVG file in that has multiple shapes on there. I don't want to group them as one. I want to keep them individual. Do I want to import hidden layers from AI files? I really don't use AI files, but say I did, I would enable this because a lot of times when you are generating files, especially from AI, there may be some hidden layers, maybe for luminance or something to that effect. That's all that is. Select imported shapes. So as soon as I import something in, they are selected. So say you had a group of objects on your screen and then you import something and you don't know where it is, say like a jigsaw puzzle you have on there and you're importing text. You want to see it, so that's all that is. Center imported shapes in edit window. I don't like to center it. I want it to appear on the screen where it is, and if it's in where I like it, I leave it, then I can move it. Or if you want it to be imported in the middle, do that. Doesn't have any impact, but it's just imported into the middle. But if you are doing this, make sure you have select imported shape enabled. That way you can see it real quick and you can move it. Allow importing to tool layers. So if I click this and say you had an object, another SVG file, you had another LightBurn file from someone gave it to you and it had a tool layer. When you click allow it, it would import their tool layer into here. That's all it's for. DXF import settings, these are a lot of times CAD drawings. I have it auto detected and I have millimeters. That's what I use. Nor text objects. If I click this, enable this, it won't bring text in. I want that text coming in. DXF import, I leave it default that are in here, 96 for Inkscape. If I was using Illustrator, I click here, but most of the time I use Inkscape. Auto detect if possible, yes. HPO PLD, that's plotting. Import precision, I leave it to 0.1 inch / 1016. Curve tolerance, millimeters, again, I leave it at 0.050. Camera. Now, a lot of people don't know this, but on the PC side, you have several options. On the Windows, unless they enabled it, last time they took it out, you may have two options here. There'll be a fallback and then recommended. The recommended is their new API or the new software that they built from the ground up. And I told you in 2.1, they even enhanced that. So the camera system's going to even look a little different. There's a lot more functionality, a lot more capabilities in 2.1. I'm really excited when that's released. The beta is amazing. But anyway, that's what the recommended is. But say you're going in, you're having issues with your camera. You're not calibrating right. The images don't look right. First thing to do is to click fallback. It's going to ask you to restart LightBurn, go back in. It's going to be using actually your operating system's camera software that's built into the software. It's not going to change the interface, but it's using the, we'll say, the innards underneath to use your camera. Sometimes that fixes systems. Depending on the camera you have, maybe an older camera, you would need to use fallback. The default overlay image, I always do black and white because my laser is black and white. I'm not doing like a Galvo laser where I can do color on steel, so I leave it black and white. My limit preview, now this is my office, so it's a little different, but the limit preview frame rate is 10 frames per second. On my laser system, I leave that. On the default camera mode, here it's 10, but in my laser itself, I have it as 2. You play with that, and then you go from there. So those are the preferences that we've gone through. Thank you for watching. Thumbs up, subscribe. A lot more projects coming. Keep sending me those questions. Keep sending me your ideas. Till next time.